welcome to Travel with Sean. I'm Sean, and today we are in Rome, Italy, and we are exploring the Via Appia Ancien, the ancient Appian Way, and one of the villas right nearby. Walking along what's called the Appian Way, the ancient Appian Way, or in Italian, it's Via Appia Ancien. This is the first Roman road, the first road built extending out of Rome. And it went on for about 120 some miles, I think almost 130 miles. It was built in 312 BC. And the purpose of the road was to get supplies to the troops, the soldiers fighting about 120, 130 miles away. So this road made it a lot easier to get the supplies to them.
This became, in essence, the Victory Road. When they were victorious in battle in southern Italy, they would march back down this road into Rome, entering near the Colosseum, marching down the Via Sacra into the Forum. So this road begins in the Forum and extends southward for over 100 miles. And it is from this road that we get the expression, all roads lead to Rome. Because after building this road and seeing how it expanded their empire, they built more roads, extending from Rome to other parts of the empire. It was popular to build houses along this road because it was easier to get building materials and other supplies from Rome. People may have built temples and churches along the road. The more people built along the road, the more the road got used, and the more Rome expanded out, allowing the emperor and senate to exercise their control over the territory, and made it easier to conquer new places, expanding their empire and the extent of their power. Just a short distance from Via Appia Antica, the first Roman road, we find Villa de Quintili, the largest and most sumptuous residence of the Roman suburbs in the 2nd century AD. The ruins of this villa are so vast that when they were first discovered, the locals called the site Roma Vecchia, meaning Old Rome.
Now we're at the Villa Quintilla, which is a little villa, an estate, built by these two brothers by the name Quintilla or Quintili, who wanted to leave the city of Rome proper and move out to the suburbs. So they moved about 5 miles out from the Roman Forum, which was downtown. And they built this little estate here to include various different buildings. And on your left, there's an there was an amphitheater that they built for training gladiators. On the other side of this wall right here, archaeologists found limestone and other building materials that were fresh, ready for construction. And what they said happened is that the upper level, the floor right above us, collapsed and fell down here. So then, to prevent anybody from going over there and getting hurt, they sealed it off. Alongside me here are courtyards, and there had been gardens. They actually found vegetables that were planted with jars of water, and alongside these they had covered walkways that led down to the base level, to the ground floor.
This area was constructed for residential and reception purposes, including a spa, an arena, and courtyards. The villa had several buildings for various purposes, including two thermal baths, a gymnasium, a gardener's building, and the main building had several rooms, including dining rooms and servants' quarters. They even had their own amphitheater and a summer dining room that had a view of the theater. Here's a room with a large, well preserved mosaic floor from the 2nd century. This floor was likely made with pebbles, each purposely placed to look like connected triangles or interconnected stars. This was a typical pattern of mosaic floors at the time.
This area around here, there were bedrooms, parlors, arenas, and they even had some outdoor patios for hosting events like parties, etc.
You can see several buildings have what appear to be several large holes in some of the walls. These were for the enormous picture windows that the villa had, some of which were practically floor to ceiling. This monumental complex overlooks the Roman countryside and offers views that have inspired many famous artists over time.
Most of this sign here says that most of this building was built in the early 2nd century, the first decades after the year 100. And they even had what they called a summer dining room. And they had a theater where you could watch the performance from the dining room.
The villa was originally owned by the Quintili brothers, who were elected officials in AD 151 and brothers to Emperor Commodus. I guess you could say that this villa was so beautiful and grand that it was to die for. In fact, the original owners, the Quintili brothers, did just that. Their brother, Emperor Commodus, was so envious of their villa that he had them executed so he could confiscate it. After their deaths, this did become an imperial estate.
So this little room, the flooring that you see is original mosaic flooring. But over here on the side is a remnant of a furnace. The purpose of the furnace was for recycling glass. So when they had glass they didn't use, they crush it up, put it in the furnace to melt it so that then they could make new glass products. So this villa that these brothers built just a few hundred feet off of the ancient road that was built in the 4th century BC. There was a road, the Appian Way, via Appia, that went from the Roman Forum to hundreds of miles south of Rome in southern Italy. That was the first Rome. That was the first Roman road, first road built in the Roman Empire. And this villa, this house, is just 5 miles from the beginning of that road and just a couple hundred feet off of it. But it was a large complex here. They even had their own spa with cold water baths, changing room, and a massage room. Now what we're looking at is this estate's gymnasium. So I already said they had a spa and they had a theater, but they also had a gymnasium.
The next stop on our tour of the ancient Roman suburbs is the Catacomb di San Callisto, or the St. Callixtus Catacombs in English. This map shows its proximity to two other ancient Roman catacombs.
Now we're at the Catacombs of St. Callixtus. St. Callixtus was a deacon who was put in charge of creating this catacombs or cemetery because catacombs was a Roman word and the Christians didn't use that word. They used something that evolved into the word we use as cemetery. But this was the first Christian burial site in Rome, and this was the largest, and it's underground. It was put in operation from the beginning, from the second part of the 2nd century until the beginning of the 4th century. There are over 300,000 people who were buried here, including 16 popes and many martyrs.
Throughout their hours of operation, the catacombs offer guided tours in various languages, including English. There is not an option for a self-guided tour. The St. Callixtus catacombs are named after Pope Callixtus I, who oversaw their construction when he was just a deacon, which means he was an ordained clergyman in training to become a Catholic priest. This little building is where you exit the underground cemetery at the end of your tour.
We just finished touring the St. Callixtus catacombs. I can't show you any footage of what it looks like there because video and photography are not allowed. But I can tell you about it. So the catacomb is a word from Latin, which was the language the Romans spoke. But the Christians spoke Greek. And the Greek word that they used for this evolved into the modern English word cemetery. So this cemetery is comprised of about 90 acres of land. And the cemetery is below the ground, goes down 4 levels, a total of about 90 meters down. And the tunnels that they built to be able to move along the burial sites come total about 22 kilometers. That's a lot. So how did this start? What happened? In the latter half of the 2nd century, the Pope wanted to provide a secure place for Christian burial. And they couldn't do it out in the open because there was an intense persecution of Christians at the time. So they built, he instructed a deacon whose name translates into English as Callixtus. He instructed this deacon to start digging an underground cemetery. Now, they didn't think that this persecution was going to last that long. So he trained men, and the Vatican paid them well. They did not use slaves. But what they did is they built these little rooms, burial rooms, various places underground. The persecution lasted a lot longer than they expected, and they ran out of space in these little rooms. So what they had to do was start building little niches, carve out a little area, a burial area in the wall. So then what they would do is they would bring the body down the tunnel, down underground into the tunnel, place this body in the burial spot in the wall, put a stone slab on it, probably limestone because that was commonly used at the time, and then that would seal it shut. And on that stone, they would carve the name of who was buried there. And then they'd also indicate when they were buried there. 300,000 people were buried there, going into the 4th century, including 16 popes and several martyrs who were people who died, who were murdered because of their faith. That's a martyr. There are many martyrs buried down there. The martyrs got special recognition. Their burial place was indicated with an arch. So they carved the regular niche, the regular little burial spot, then they carved a little bit more, carved an arch, and secured it better so it wouldn't fall apart. And then on their marker, on their grave marker, they also added PM, or was it MP? I forget which. But that was an indication that they were martyred. The language that they used on these names and anything else written there was all Greek. Because, as I said, that was the language of the Christians. But that changed going into the 4th century when the Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity and made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. That was what they called the freedom. They still refer to that today as the freedom, when they were free to become Christians or to be Christians. And after the freedom, the Christians started using the Latin language. And so anything down there was written in Latin starting in the 4th century after the conversion of the Emperor Constantine. When they stopped using this cemetery, they still cared for it, took care of it for many years. But then in the 8th century, 9th century, that time frame, they feared an attack of people that they referred to as barbarians. Whether these were Germanic tribes or somebody else, we don't know. They called them barbarians. But they were fearful that the barbarians were going to come down here and destroy the cemetery and defile the bodies. So they removed the bodies as many as they could, as quick as they could, as time allowed, to get them reburied somewhere else securely and safely. Then they forgot about the cemetery until the 1800s. 1849, this catacomb, this cemetery was rediscovered, and they started opening it up, digging out the dirt, fixing up the graves and the burial markers the best they could. It took them 6 years to work on reconstruction. And you know what? They only got through about 2/3 of the cemetery. It's just so vast. I said there were 4 levels. The 4th level being the lowest, the deepest. They didn't fully uncover the 4th level. So there might still be bodies down there. Because when I said they removed the bodies from the cemetery, they did this in haste. They had to rush. So maybe they didn't finish. We don't know for sure. The cemetery also has frescoes, paintings on the walls in many different areas, usually telling Bible stories. Sometimes they painted symbols, like a shepherd carrying a sheep, reference to Jesus as the Good Shepherd. Maybe they paint a dove, representing the Holy Spirit. But these paintings, they believe, were put there in the 4th century after the freedom. And we spent 50 minutes on this tour, a half hour underground. We didn't even see more than 2 levels. We didn't even see these levels entirely. But the tour guide said if someone wanted to see the entire cemetery, it could take you 3 or 4 full days of walking around exploring. There's no light down there. Well, there is now. They put electricity underground and lamps in different places so visitors can see their way around. In ancient times, when they buried people down there, they would bring a little lamp that burned olive oil. And they actually even stored jars of olive oil down there so that people could relight their lamps or keep their lamps lit. And they have paintings showing that as well. The Romans confiscated this cemetery twice. And that's a reason why this was not a hideout for Christians. Lack of oxygen, and Romans could take over. What they did when they confiscated it, again, Roman law said they could not go into a burial site, so they stood guard at the entrance, not letting anyone in. That happened twice. And when that happened, they would build other burial places. But Roman law also said that properties could not connect. So you had to have some space between your property and your neighbor's property. Maybe a wall or a road or some trees, something separating your property. And if they found out that you had underground tunnels connecting your property to someone else's, they would confiscate it. They would block the entrance until they could block it up to prevent anyone from going down. But what I was saying, during these times that they confiscated this cemetery, blocked off the entrances, the Christians had to find other people with land, sufficient land, that they could dig tunnels on. They couldn't just continue these tunnels or dig a tunnel on somebody's land to connect over here. So they had separate catacombs. There's over 50 in Rome. I think the exact number was 56, but it was over 50 different catacombs on different properties throughout Rome. In this area, by this one, this is in between two other smaller catacombs that were built during this period of confiscation. But this, of course, is the oldest and the largest. Thank you for watching, and thank you for traveling along with me. As always, I appreciate your support. Until next time, ciao, arrivederci, bye-bye.